All right, so I imported this speaker from the demo on Wednesday. You can see here's where I cut from the USB slot and all that stuff. Let's see here, I'll minimize this. I just want you to be able to see the keyshot or the PDF next to this. You need to follow along. That's pretty tiny, I'm imagining. Okay, sorry, I don't like that. That's too small. You probably can't see it anyway. So, again, model from Wednesday's class. So the first thing the demo has you do is just setting up the scene and the render. So this will be a bit of a recap. So this, again, you have your library on the left, your scene and stuff on the right. The thing that I want to point out that's an issue is there were components in here. And when I imported it into SOLIDWORKS as a solid part, the components disappeared. The workaround for that, if that is an issue for you, and I'll be honest, I don't know why that's the case. I don't know if it's because like it was components that were converted from an STL to a SOLIDWORKS part. Sometimes keyshot and SOLIDWORKS don't play nice together. But the workaround for that, so if I go back here into SOLIDWORKS and I open up that file that I just imported into keyshot, so here it is, class speaker. I can show you that the components are in there. The solution is to save it out as a step file and import it to keyshot as a step, or a parasolid, either one. I mean, you can see the components are in there, but they clearly did not import into keyshot. Here we can see it kept all of the raw CAD parts that we built, it just lost the internal guts. So if you go to File, Save As, and save as a parasolid, I believe it's that quick, it doesn't take long. And now if I go File, Import, and open up this parasolid, I mean, I'll show you my settings here. I typically stick with the defaults. Add to scene, snap to ground, click import. That looks like it came in a lot bigger. Oh no, it's the same size. Now if I expand this one, you'll see all of the components came in here. So this is just a PSA, public service announcement. If you are losing your components, or even if you don't want to mess with it, you don't want to have to reopen it in SOLIDWORKS, just save your SOLIDWORKS file out as a step, or sorry, as a parasolid. I believe it'll work as a step as well, but in this case as a parasolid, and import it to keyshot that way. You should have less issues or less bugs if you do that step first, even though it's a bit of extra work. Okay, so now we have this in here. It's not sitting on the ground how I want it, because this is how it's built in SOLIDWORKS. I believe this was a 5-degree draft, so in my project panel over here, I'm going to select the body we imported, and I'm going to go to position here, and I want to rotate it. Trying to think, I can't. So I'm assuming that Y is up and down, Z is back, and X is left and right. So I want to rotate it about its horizontal axis here, so about X. And if I remember that this is 5 degrees draft, I'm just going to type in -5 here and hit Tab. And we can see it kind of rotated that. And now if I click on snap to ground, oops, it didn't like that. So there must be something under here. If you click snap to ground and it like doesn't visibly look like it's on the ground, the simplest way to do that, I would do it, is just take kind of a side view like this, click on the move tool, and just drag this green arrow down until it visibly looks like it's sitting on there. And then you can kind of zoom out, check the shadow, make sure it's working. Some recommendations again for material for this: under plastic, hard and rough, these are the settings that I recommend. You can drag, I'm going to drag it and apply it to this back body. You can double click on this, brings up the material properties. To change the color, it's over here under diffuse. So if I'm following this like demo, I mean, it really doesn't matter, whatever color you want to pick. And then I think for the speaker mesh, at least for the demo, it recommended cloth and leather. And under cloth, there was a cloth weave, and get this kind of simple speaker texture here. If I double click on this under textures, I can play with the size and the mapping. So if we want the weave to look bigger, or you can go back and refer to any of those videos from Project 3 about custom texture, and setting that up in Google image searching stuff. As far as the environment goes, the recommendation here is to set up a custom environment. Now, if you really liked your environment from Project 3 and want to reuse it, I say go for it. You spent time setting that up. But if I show what the demo recommends under Studio, there should be all black. Basic, here it is, all black 4K. I'm going to drag this over here to create a new environment. And then I'm going to start setting up the lights. Well, actually, firstly, I'm going to change the, under environment, I'm going to change my background to a white color, so it's not the environment. And then under HDRI editor, I'm going to add a pin. And now wherever I click is where that highlight will be on the object, right? So I'm going to click somewhere like on the top of it, somewhere like there, maybe. And then under the settings, if I follow what this recommends, brightness, we'll just tone it down. But we're going to make the size bigger. We'll set this to be 40. We're just looking to get general lighting over this. And I'll leave it at that. Maybe I'll move it a little bit towards the front there, more front leaning. All right, then the next one we're going to add, so that's just a general like get it lit. The next one, we'll put it catching one of these edges. So here I've added my second light. The click to place disappeared, so I'm going to go back over here and click on the target to set highlight. So down here it should say Control plus left mouse button to add highlight, or LMB. And now wherever I click, that highlight will appear. Again, if you're following the tutorial, when you look at this, set a light catching an edge, medium radius about 30, but double brightness. So now I'm going to go back here and change the brightness to 2. And again, I'm going to continue to play with this now that I have the brightness set. Maybe again, angling towards the front a little bit. I'm trying to get it right on this edge. I guess I'm fussing too much. There we go, just catching this edge. And then the next recommendation is to add another light, also at double brightness, maybe a bit smaller. So maybe this one, again, if you need to set it, click on the target. I'm going to set it back here. Brightness, again, I'll double it, but maybe I'll make this one a bit more narrow. And now if I double click on this material here, whoops, I didn't mean to do that because I moved the lighting. I want it there. So once you're happy with where your lighting is placed, you can click Done. I'm going to double click on this and just take the roughness down a bit. That way it'll pick up this reflection a bit more. This is just a very basic like 1, 2, 3 lighting setup for this. I think catching edges with lights helps. Again, it's up to you, but I think you can light an object with 3 pin lights pretty effectively, is what I recommend. All right. The next thing you want to do is sort of figure out your hero shot. So this is kind of showing your object in its ideal light for this render. So I would take some, if we go back to camera over here, lens settings, pay attention to focal length. The smaller this is, the more extreme the perspective. The larger it is, the less perspective there is. I think anywhere between like 30 and 60 is typical. I would maybe recommend, I mean, this default was set at 50. If you wanted to just make it a little bit more dramatic, you could like pump it, take that down to like 40 or 35 maybe. But that's all preference. And then typically for a hero, it's like a 3/4 shot looking down on it. If it's a big object like a refrigerator, it might be more of a view like this where you don't see the top. But I think most objects you all are working on, I would imagine we see the top of it. Maybe if it's like a dash cam and you're looking up at it, I could see you justify a render more like that. But just think about how the user will interact with the object, how they might typically see it and show it in sort of its ideal angle, its best shot. Once you have that set up how you want, you can save that camera angle by going up here to the camera tab, clicking add new camera, and just type in hero. And now this way, you know, anytime you move it around, you're changing materials or applying a new concept, if you click on that hero, it'll snap back into place. And again, hopefully once you have that hero angle set, that'll work for all your concepts, hopefully. But if you need to change it per concept, that's fine too. Okay. What else here? That's all, again, that's all just Photoshop, or sorry, keyshot recap. Just real quick, back from projects 2 and 3. The main meat and potatoes of this is on this second page, okay? So in order to do a section view of this, I guess another way that I neglected to mention, if for some reason it's not working for you in keyshot or you don't like it, in SolidWorks, you could find these two bodies here. You could click on move body. So mine's up here, but if you can't find it, just type in move. And you can drag this over here and add it to your command manager. And you can click on this, select these two bodies that you, whatever shell you want to cut, just use move body to copy them. So we're actually not it's counterintuitive. We're actually not moving them. I guess we're using the copy part of this command, not move, but copy. So we're selecting both of these, no translation, no movement, just copy, and we're making one copy, and we're going to click check. It's going to ask us, it's saying, hey, you haven't moved anything. Do you want to do that? And it's like, yep, we're just copying in this case. And what you can do then is you can take the right plane, cut with surface. So it loads the right plane because I already selected it. If I hadn't, once I do cut with surface, you need to make your tree visible. Click on the right plane. And now we can see with this arrow, it's cutting away to the left. You can flip it to the right if you want. Now here for feature scope, you don't want it auto-selected. You want to select the two copy bodies that we just made. So in this case, I'm selecting from the expanded tree here. You can also select from this window by copying on things. And now I can check that box. And now if I bring this into keyshot, I have these two bodies to render, and then I have these two cut bodies. So for some reason you're struggling with keyshot, this is how you could do it with a SolidWorks step. And then you could import this, and then to do this section view render, you could simply render this view. So again, that's the way to do it with SolidWorks if you need to do that. Unfortunately, that's not covered in this sheet. But again, it will be part of this recording to refer back to. So in keyshot, the way to do it is we need to add new geometry. So you go to edit, add geometry. In this case, we want to add a cube. If I drag this here, you can see it added it to our scene. It's listed up here in the project panel. So what we're going to do is we want to make this cube take up roughly half the size of this speaker. So while the cube is still selected, over here in position and scale, you can just dial this slider up until it's about half the size. But you can also change the proportion of the cube. So the scale, if I want it to be twice as tall, I can do that. And now I can move the cube again, basically the goal is to move it so it is covering half of the object. I would say there's two other goals here. You don't want it, so one of the bugs that's happened in the past is if the cube is so big that you're viewing the object from inside of the cube, that led to problems. So you want your cube to be more or less exactly the size it needs to be and not much bigger if you can avoid it. Okay, the other issue you may want to avoid, so if I click on snap to ground here, or here, let me make this a little bit more obvious, hopefully. Drag that cube up, and now I'm going to click snap to ground. It'll snap it down, but we'll look at this. I believe all said and done, you need to move it a little bit off the ground to avoid getting weird shadows here. All right, so now that you have your cube, it's about covering half your object. You double click on this, and I mean, you can do this one of two ways. You can apply a cutaway from the left side here in the library panel. I forget where it is. I believe there's something called, oh, there it is, cutaway. So I mean, you could literally drag one of these over to this, and it will apply this cutaway view. Or you can double click on it, because that has some settings built in. You can double click on this cube. Why is this not working for us? For me. Okay, that was weird. I don't know why it wasn't showing up. You can double click on the cube, and then hopefully you see, when you do this, you'll see, hopefully you'll see this type and color properties, so on and so forth. Basically, you want to go to this type dropdown and look for cutaway under special. And this will allow you then to customize it. So the first option here is what kind of cap style. Right now it defaults to no caps, and that's why it looks like these bodies are hollow. I do not recommend that. I think it looks fake. What we want to do, I believe, is inherent caps. That pop-up was basically saying make sure you're using solid bodies and not surfaces from your source component. So I'll be honest, this is where the bugs have happened in the past. For some reason, sometimes using inherent caps has led to weird results. Things just like looking funny on the inside here. If that's the case, again, we'll talk about workarounds. One of them is the first one I showed you, which is to cut it in half in SOLIDWORKS and bring it in that way. Again, inherent caps is what I recommend. Color was like what that last one showed, in which case you can always customize this and change it. After inherent caps, I think color is the next best option, personally. This is just my personal preference. And I would choose like a middle gray, maybe. Or you can even choose a material directly from, I believe, the material library. I guess I'm not quite sure how that works, though. Oh, I guess you can apply a texture to it. This is where you could like use an opacity to apply like hash marks or dots or some texture to it to really make it look like a cutaway, more like a textbook cutaway. Again, though, my general advice is to go with inherent caps if you can get that to work. Now, I think in order to, the way that I think this section view looks best is excluding the internal components so that you can show off the components that you downloaded or just show that they fit in there. So what you do is once you have your cap selected, you go to this excluded objects, you click on the plus sign, this will pop up. I believe you can select objects directly by clicking on them. So here I clicked on the speaker and it added it here, or it highlighted it here, and I can click on OK. And now it adds it to the list, and you can see that it's now no longer cut away. I believe if you hold down Control or Shift, Control, nope, I believe wrong. Anyway, okay, you can't shift and click within by selecting from the window. You can shift and click, however, within this list here. So if you have your parts named, right, or if you see what's highlighted in orange, you'll end up selecting the stuff. You can hopefully find what you want to exclude and click on OK. And there you have it. We have our speaker sitting proud of our shell here. Some weird things going on at the bottom here, probably have noticed. Firstly, the cube is not cutting all the way through the speaker. And that's because, if you recall, I manually set the speaker to the ground, so it looks like I have it a bit lower. I can simply go back to the scene here, click on the speaker, right-click on it, and say Move, and just drag it up a bit, and then that got rid of all that mess at the bottom, so that it's being cut by the cube now. However, you'll also notice that the cube is omitting part of the shadow here. I'm going to right-click. Now, the other problem is, once you click away from the cube, how do you edit the material again? The way to do that is to go back up here to the project panel, right-click on this, click on material, and say Edit Material. Now, I'll be honest, I wish there was a way. I don't know why it would take the cutaway material and apply it to the shadows. That really bothers me. I wish there was a setting to omit that, and there may be, but I'm not aware of it. My workaround in the past has been to basically select both of these things, the speaker and the cube, and just move them slightly above the ground, just a touch, so that the cube is no longer in the ground, but it looks like the speaker is still sitting on there. And again, the reason I move both is that if I just move the cube off the ground, we're probably going to get this like weird sliver at the bottom. You can see as the cube moves up, it reveals more of the object that it's cutting away. So again, you just want to pick up whatever geometry you're using for the cutaway, just lift it off the ground a touch, and the shadow should work. Another acceptable workaround is simply to just turn the shadow off. And I believe that's under Environments, Settings, Ground Shadows. Just uncheck that box. Which, I mean, I think is acceptable for a section view to not have shadows. This is more of like an engineering view showing off the object. For what it's worth, you know, these are the default materials on the guts that came in. It was already colored close to what it wanted to be. That may not always be the case. I think it looks best if you take the time to go in and apply appropriate materials to your components. But I would say that's not as important if you just want your components to kind of be secondary. It's just showing it fits and have like a neutral gray across the board on those. I'd say that's all right. I think it will look better if you apply materials, take that time, but let's say it's not a requirement to do that, which I will make a note of right now. Any questions on any of this?
I have one. Would you recommend like to apply those materials to these components before doing the section cut view, or how you're doing it right now is the better way to do it?
I think either way. Yeah, I mean, you know, if I roll back in time and imagine that I'm now back to applying materials to this, and I just kind of hide. If I just kind of hide these, like now, yeah, now would probably be a good time to apply it. I think it's all workflow, so it's personal preference. There may be something weird that happens when I mean, we can try it now. I'll experiment with this. So let's imagine I want this back to be metallic. I can go to metal here, aluminum. It seems to work. I was wondering if, like, by dragging it over here, somehow it would interfere with the cube, but it doesn't appear to interfere. An argument you could make for waiting until this point is now you'll know what you see. You know, so like there may be a little piece in the back you don't need to worry about applying a material to, for example. Yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it just like when you were doing the section cut first, like I know there's like all the parts kind of what's in there. So like my thought process was like, yeah, like I'd like to see all the parts just so I know exactly what they were. But I guess that's just me though. But yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, definitely a good argument to be made for like seeing it as you're doing it, you know. So starting first is a good way to do it. Again, I think it just comes down to personal preference. Again, I do recommend for your section view here, I'm going to edit this again. So again, material, because you can't see it anymore, obviously. So go to material edit. And then here, if you want to exclude more things, again, you can hit this plus sign. I want to exclude this wire. Click OK, it'll add it to this list. So then we have this wire. I don't have the USB-C thing in here, but I could have put it in. Yeah, as far as like the render goes, you might be able to get away with just using the same hero shot for the section if that's what you prefer. Again, think about showing it in its best light in terms of, I don't know, how to show off the components or the object. I mean, a back view may not be a bad idea, especially if you went through the trouble to like model some of these mounting points. I think those are nice details, so you may want to show that off too. But basically, for next week, what I'm expecting is some kind of render like this, and some kind of render like this for each concept. I'll leave it up to you if you want to throw it, if you want to add it into your PDF from our last review when everyone kind of went over their project, their goal. I mean, I guess that would probably be my recommendation because then you're constantly working towards an end product. It takes away a step you may have to do later. But at the bare minimum, I'm just expecting the 3 concepts. And we're mainly looking at the renders. We're not really going to get into CAD on that day. It's again to give feedback. It's to simulate as if we are all the collective clients of each other. We are looking at the 3 different concepts and saying we like, we like the buttons on A, the form of B, but we would make it maybe a little bit more narrow or something, that kind of stuff. I mean, and just general feedback, whatever your preference is, and helping each other out, to come up with that final. For what it's worth, for those of you that did build that one concept for today, it is possible if you, again, with your, I don't know what your strategy is, but you could potentially get multiple concepts from one, change the overall form, change the proportion. I mean, it's up to you. Again, I realize you have a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot going on, juggling classes, juggling this whole situation with quarantine. So my advice is to get 3 different, completely different concepts as much as you can. But if you end up having one concept that you split into 2 others by varying some stuff and using SOLIDWORKS, what it's good for, the kind of parametric modeling, and coming in and changing some shapes, that's, as far as I'm concerned for this class, that's okay. I think for like your portfolio, if you're looking for something a little bit, something you want to show off and use, then I would definitely recommend erring more on the side of diversity in the concepts. All right, well, I already any questions, new questions since that?
I just have a little one talking about portfolios. I know you're asking for the section cut views.
Yeah.
Past projects I've done for 3D work, I've done exploded views. Do you think it matters like what you put on the portfolio, like what companies prefer to see, or is that dependent on like the type of work you get applying for?
That's a great question. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think exploded views are a little bit more typical. The reason why, and the short answer, I think you kind of said it already, is it does depend on where you're going and what they typically do. If we look ahead here, on Wednesday, we're going to go over exploded views in SOLIDWORKS. And I believe the requirement here is to have an exploded view of the final. No, it's not. It's to have, let's look at this. In the past, what I've done is I switched this to be from a section view to an exploded view. Now, this was one of the other workarounds I offered in the past. Again, when it comes to this section view, the main bug that I've seen in the past is with the caps. For whatever reason, sometimes the inherent caps don't work. I don't know why. Again, one of them was when the cube was too big. That was one of the problems. So I have offered in the past a workaround, instead of doing a section view, would be to do an exploded view. If that's something you feel strongly about, I will allow that. That's okay. So if you want to replace your section view with an exploded view, I guess let me put it this way. If you want to do that, just email me and I'll say yes. But I just want it to be like, I'm sorry if I'm making red tape there. It's more to just make sure we're on the same page. Because for this project, the reason I prefer a section view, I think it's a little bit easier, if I'm being honest. And I think it's unique. It's a different skill to learn. We will cover exploded views Wednesday. I think what I did in the past is I changed this to be an exploded view requirement. And I mean, that's something you could do here. Maybe on this one, we could say this is up to you. For the 3 concepts, I request a section view unless you specifically want to do an exploded view, in which case let me know. Here we can say this is optional between exploded or section. As far as like the reason for one over the other in terms of like industry, that I don't know why one would pick one over the other. I mean, exploded view shows how something comes together. Section view maybe shows how components fit. So this would show more like the spacing around it. An exploded view is more of like, hey, this is how it's assembled. Sorry, Jocelyn, I missed your question here. When I imported the demo speaker into Keyshot, the speaker did show up. Okay, that's good. Again, it's weird. I don't know. SolidWorks and Keyshot don't always play nice together. Alex, did I answer your question on exploded view and versus section?
Yes, you did. Thank you for that.
Cool. Yeah. So to make it clear, for the 3 concept renders, it's a hero plus a section. If you want an exploded view, just let me know. When it comes to the final concept, it's 2 heroes, 1 detail, and 1 section or exploded view. Whoops, I can edit this so that we remember. All right, while I'm editing this, if you haven't uploaded your homework yet, please do that. What we'll do is we'll take a break and I'll use the second half of class to look at, I'll see how many files are on there. I'll divide the remaining time by that number of files, and I will just go through 1 file at a time, say the person's name, offer you questions, but also just give feedback. Oh, that's, yeah, I believe you all have the ability to move it. If you can just drag it into that folder, it just will help me keep track of stuff. No worries though, it happens. Sometimes things get uploaded in the wrong place. If it happens, just let me know and I can find it, or if you're able to move it, that's cool too. What other thing did I say? Material is optional here. Oh, my bad. Let me double check that. It's possible I made a mistake with the upload. So here, I'm going to stop these recordings.